All right. Back here again. This is my last time on stage for this Axicon, and I'm happy to have Ariana with me. Maybe a quick word of introduction for those of you who don't know you would be good.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Ariana Simpson. I'm one of the general partners at A16z. I tend to lead a lot of our consumer investments, especially Web3 games. So obviously, that's why I'm here. And prior to joining Andreessen, I was running my own funds. And prior to that, I spent time at Facebook and BitGo back in the day.
Yeah, and also one of the more bullish people on Sky Mavis that we talked to during the Series B round last year. So the panel talk here is, of course, why Web3 gaming matters. A lot of people, or I'm sure some people here have heard about how you came into crypto, but maybe a quick kind of background story there and how you feel like that fits in with games as well.
Sure. So I first kind of fell down the crypto rabbit hole in 2013. I had spent some time traveling around Southern Africa and specifically spent time in Zimbabwe. And they had gone through a really bad bout of hyperinflation. And so when I was there, I kind of saw the devastation of the economy and how they were having a hard time getting back on their feet. And so when I came back to the US, a friend of mine who had spent a lot of time already in the early Bitcoin circles said, oh, well, Bitcoin is deflationary, you should look into this. And I started reading and researching about it, and I just got really excited about what I saw as the potential. Obviously, the space was largely Bitcoin-centric at that point in time, and we've since expanded Web3 to include all kinds of amazing things far beyond Bitcoin, but that was sort of the genesis story. And in terms of games, I was reminiscing recently about kind of my early game days. I would play Sims, and I was fortunate to be in a school that kind of prioritized computers. So I spent many, many hours playing Oregon Trail, and then things like Icy Tower and Tux Racer back in the day. So that was kind of the origin story for me. It goes back to literally being a child.
Yeah, did you ever think about when you got into crypto that this could be a good fit for gaming as well, or was it just from the early days, I guess?
Yeah, I think the early days were really focused on infrastructure because we needed to lay the infrastructure foundations before we could start to imagine more interesting consumer applications. I think the infrastructure is still being built, obviously, and I think what you guys have been doing with Ronin and your plans on that front are also a really important part of that story. But originally, we had to lay at least some groundwork infrastructure-wise in order to enable some of these experiences.
Yeah, I think when I'm looking back at when we got started, late 2017, I got attracted to crypto. At first it was about owning your asset, kind of the speculation part of it, and then I started realizing that you can actually own your game items as NFTs, CryptoKitties, and then it was the natural oh shit, we should definitely make a game here. I feel like this is perfect for everything that my entire background. And then just kind of started building with it, and then we also realized that there's a lot to make on the infrastructure side too, right? We continuously kept facing this wall of just, oh, now there's not enough block space on Ethereum. Oh, now we're being outcompeted by DeFi applications, for example. And I think that stage in early 2018, it wasn't necessarily so clear that gaming would be the breakout use case, for example. I feel like a lot of people were talking about DeFi. Did you ever feel I guess from the 2018, 2019 standpoint, were you interested in gaming at all back then, or is it more other DeFi focused then?
No, I definitely was. Similar to you guys, my sort of gaming story in Web3 started with CryptoKitties, which obviously was kind of the first game that got some attention and generated a lot of excitement in terms of use case. But I think, so I was number one, excited about NFTs, and number two, excited about games. And actually, if you go back and look at my old fund deck, so the fund that I started before I joined Andreessen, there were 3 categories, and one of them was games. So yeah, I've been interested and excited, and I've really always viewed it as, well, number one, it's clearly a category that tons of people are excited about in general. And number two, something that could help onboard people into crypto. And that's something that I got into the space in 2013, and it was really hard to start to learn about it and understand it because there just weren't a lot of very user-friendly ways of doing it. Obviously, things have improved considerably, but I think games have played a really important part of that story and will continue to play an important part of the story of bringing, tens, hundreds of millions of users into crypto for the first time.
Yeah, and of course, that's what we're aiming to do at Axie, right? We think, onboarding users is one of the, I think we're doing a service to the entire crypto space, of course, because when I'm looking at what happened last year, right? So many people found crypto through Axie. It's pretty crazy. And I feel like it will have a special place in the heart of many, just like CryptoKitties maybe has a special place in my heart, right? I remember that very fondly. And I think that people will have the same feeling for Axie, especially as we keep building, right? As we're still here, some of these very special early stage NFTs, right? It's to me, it's digital history, right? That's really what it is. And I think for an onboarding perspective, it's just, I cannot see anything that's more natural than just like, hey, I'm playing a game. OK, I can actually get some value here in the long term. What does it mean? What's the next thing I have to do? Oh, and now I'm setting up a wallet. The next thing is, OK, now I can suddenly trade. Oh, I can spend my money that I have in my wallet on real world goods. Like, why do we even need a bank, right? Suddenly, you're banking the unbanked throughout the world. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, and I think you guys, in addition to helping onboard so many new users, really kicked off an entirely new category. And I think when we at Andreessen are looking at companies, it's not often the case that we're able to find someone who has literally kicked off a new genre, a new category. And so I think in addition to sort of having a lot of users who will have fond memories of playing Axie back in the early days, I think you also have tons of teams, many of them here, who were hugely inspired and or motivated to start building in Web3 games as a result of what you guys did, which I think is really awesome.
Yeah, and also, of course, it really makes me happy to see people use the Axie NFTs for something special, right? I think, when we started to understand actually the potential of NFTs in general, right? It's so obvious that they are platforms, that they are actually launchpads for many, many different experiences, right? And having one asset, could be an Axie NFT, could be whatever else, that can be used across many, many different things. To me, that is the metaverse. Actually, that's the real deal. It's not about the fidelity of it. It's not, to me, how you look at it. It's how you interact with it. So I'm very excited about kind of taking the next step and adding more interoperability to some of these assets. Of course, with Axie, it's everything is connected into this one universe. But expanding outwards from there, I think will also be quite exciting. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about onboarding, but outside of that, when we look at Web3, are there any other specific things? I think I touched on a little bit identity. What do you think like gaming is like the perfect fit for, other than onboarding, right?
Well, I think games broadly sometimes unfairly get a bad rap because people are like, oh, that's a waste of time, whatever. First of all, I mean, I think just the fact that so many people get so much joy and enthusiasm from playing games means that there's obviously value in that. But I think there's also a lot of other skills that people, looking back, can ascribe to the hours they spent playing games. Community building. I mean, I see that very much alive and well here. Like the relationships that people have formed that started, by playing Axie or playing other games can be really meaningful. Problem solving. There's tons, I think, of other sorts of benefits that can really come from games. And yeah, I think especially as we move into an increasingly digital world, having this idea of like a portable online identity that is yours, but is really meaningful to you, I think is also a super interesting angle.
Yeah, this is very anecdotal, but it's a part of my actually digital history, right? So some of you know I'm an ex-competitive gamer. I represented Norway in Warcraft 3, in Dota, and also like I was a top player in Dota 2. But a lot of that history online is almost impossible to find, right? If you're Googling my nickname, you'll find it in like a Swedish or Russian random page where Norway was, battling Sweden, back in, when was that, like 12 years ago. And, obviously that doesn't matter for anyone but me. Like and to me it matters a lot because that's a part of when I grew up. That's a part of what I feel like my achievements online. And I really feel like once we get to the point where the games start issuing these prizes, when they start issuing achievements, right, that people can own over time and have as a part of their identities, that's really also the beginning of something totally different, which we haven't necessarily seen before. Because usually when a game shuts down, everything is gone. And I'm not saying here that it's about getting value necessarily in every single other game. It's about people having that in their wallet and being able to show others if they want, right? So you would have to have like zero knowledge proofs technology, right? So I don't want everyone to see what I have in my wallet, but to me it matters a lot. And imagine if I'm coming into a new game in the future. All right, I'm 50 years old. I don't have time to show people or to play many hours. I might be like, okay, I'm flexing my whatever I did playing World of Warcraft or Dota, and then I get the instant respect that I feel like I deserve. Like, to me, that would matter. And I feel like that's the future where we are headed within like the gaming ecosystem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like for you guys, there's those elements, and then there's also just I really view it as a question of like fundamental fairness towards players, of allowing people to get credit for their wins and then also to participate in the upside of the value they're creating. And I think that's really one of the core elements of the movement that you guys kicked off. It's not necessarily that everybody's going to be like a full-time Axie player and that's going to be their main source of income forever, but it's saying, okay, like, we're all a part of a community here. The only people profiting should not be the people who made the game. And I think that has and you see it in the community here as well, really bought a loyalty and enthusiasm for the game and Axie more broadly that I think is really special.
Yeah, and we shouldn't also, we've learned a lot over building Axie, right? I mean, last year was a very special year in terms of just adoption, people getting excited. Was it for all the right reasons? Probably a little bit of crypto, enthusiasm in there, I guess we can all agree on. And now we've kind of seen this, like what people might call the play-to-earn space. Now it's play and earn. The end result might be play and own, or just like play a game where you actually you take a part of the value that's being generated. So I think as we are also on this journey from a Sky Mavis perspective, speaking more broadly from like an investor standpoint, right? What do you see when you're talking to different teams, right? At this point, are people focused on this kind of evolution of play and own, or is it still like, okay, we're trying to make sure that everyone can live inside these games immediately? What's the kind of the next step here?
Yeah, I think right now, you guys inspired a ton of teams to build somewhat similar models, copycats in some cases, but also just the inspiration of what you guys did. And so I've seen a lot of teams trying to figure out like sustainable economic models that can work for this genre of games. And I think the numbers that Jiho shared yesterday were awesome, because I think you guys are making huge strides in balancing the economy, and that's really exciting to see. But people are also experimenting with different architectures from a more technical perspective. So bringing not just the game assets online, but also bringing, for example, the game logic. Yeah. So I think some of those experiments in games are all still very early, and right now they're very much targeted to a technical audience, therefore somewhat more limited in terms of the kinds of folks who are playing them now. But I think eventually, that will probably be another subcategory that gains some meaningful velocity within Web3 games.
Yeah, I remember I was working for another game studio before Sky Mavis, and they were trying to make the space game. And the part of that was using zero knowledge proofs technology to procedurally generate the world. Nobody was able to know like where the planets were, basically all that stuff. And the vision was ambitious, to say the least, because it didn't exist. Like how, and now what I'm excited about, for example, is Dark Forest. I think Dark Forest is a premier example of something that they're actually on the very bleeding edge, but from a commercial standpoint, like I'm not necessarily sure if they can hit that massive scale that I know that we're looking for. But I'm still super excited, like just from a crypto native kind of like, hey, this is actually super cool, and maybe we can use that potentially in Axie down the line, right? As it is evolving.
Yeah, they're exactly one of the games I would categorize in that on-chain games universe, and probably the ones among those who really kind of kicked off the category. So
yeah, it's
definitely an area to watch.
Super exciting, right? So one of the things that I think we generally agree on is that players that are playing games should be able to, take a part of the value that's being accrued in the game, right? And a lot of that is happening often through tokenomics, right? We find that the way that we design the AXS token is, it should be aligning incentives between, developers and the players themselves. And I think that's historically been very hard from, it has never really been done in the same way. So, how do you see that from a Web3 kind of native game developer perspective versus the traditional Web2 companies that might be kind of crypto curious when they're looking at token economies? Do you see anyone kind of leaning into doing the same thing that we're doing with Axie, or is it still really just kind of out there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably the closest analog from the Web 2 world, I would say, is maybe Roblox, in that they've really incentivized people to build on the platform. I think obviously their economic share is less favorable than what you guys have done. But in general, they're somewhat more aligned as far as Web 2 companies go. I mean, I think what's going to be really exciting to see is Axie, Sky Mavis, Ronin become a real platform, and that's already starting to happen. I was super excited to hear about all the amazing games that are going to be launching soon from the Builders program and otherwise. But to me, that's what's really going to give you guys the most robust community and therefore the most staying power over time. And I think it's very synergistic. You guys obviously built a super successful game, which is how you were able to get to the point where you can now become a platform for others to build as well. But I think that kind of motion is going to be really positive for you guys and going to give a lot more momentum than what any individual one team would be able to build by themselves. And you know that, and that's why you're going in that direction. Yeah,
I think over time, as we've kind of solidified that vision, and now seeing these builders actually, come in, and it's so pure to me, right? Because we have this very general agreement. They come in and they want to make something, and it's for the community, right? They feel like there is something to tap into here because there's so much excitement around Axie and basically around everything that's happening here. And I think this is a testament to just not only to the potential of Axie, but to the potential of pretty much everything inside the space. Yeah, so to me, it's just been very humbling even to be here and to be able to see and meet people, right, in real life. And I think there's one thing that I wish we could have done more, right? Because historically, from a crypto standpoint, I guess in general, a lot of relationships are solidified when you meet people in real life. So a little bit of a tangent here. It's not related to why Web3 gaming matters, but mostly about community building as well, right? So because you've been here almost from the start. How have you seen these communities evolve after people are meeting each other in real life and sub-communities follow, some drama emerges? I think what we're seeing in Axie is that there's not that much drama, but I feel like it's only a matter of time before we'll see factions here and there split up. So it's a social, the social fabric, I guess, is being built here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of that is human nature, and there's always going to be disgruntled people. I think, haters are going to hate, and whatever, they can do that. But I think the reality is, even when it sounds like there's a lot of negative voices, typically it's just a couple really loud people saying the same things over and over again. And so, being in crypto for nearly a decade, I've had to do a lot of tuning out of that personally. And so I think you just kind of have to ignore it and continue focusing on what you have in common and what you're all trying to do here, which I think more often than not is really aligned in terms of making the game successful or making even the crypto ecosystem more broadly work.
Yeah, speaking of that, going back to Web3 gaming versus, or well, not call them versus, but the people who don't believe in NFTs, Web3 gaming at all, there are many skeptics out there. Of course, in Axie, we're getting a brunt of it. I can only imagine from the A16z perspective as well, being very aggressive investors in the space.
Who, me?
Yeah, no. But it's generally speaking, how can we, what is, in your opinion, the right approach to kind of onboarding these or convincing these guys? Have you given up convincing people, or is it just it's a process?
Yeah, I think it's rare to be able to convince somebody by having a conversation, in my experience. Because at this point, there's enough information out there that the people who want to learn and understand will get there. And the people who are still putting their head in the sand and saying, oh, this is all a scam, or oh, this is never going to work, pretty much no amount of data is going to change their mind. And so I don't think it's my job or our job really to convince people of that. I think what you want to do is just focus on the thing and keep building. Because at a certain point, the proof is in the pudding. You guys have made a game that millions of people clearly want to play. Duh, it worked. To me, that's really the crux of the matter. And so the way to do it is just to keep building, focus on, releasing a product, getting the community, focus on the people who care, and the rest, they can come along for the journey if they'd like, but if they don't want to, that's also up to them.
Yeah, it's just, when I look out at the broader ecosystem, there are very, very loud voices, journalists oftentimes that come in with these preconceived notions, and they cherry pick reasons, specific things that are happening in a community, and they kind of ignore everything that's bubbling down. Okay, who are the people who are actually interacting with it? They seek the sensationalist stories, and I think that's part of the course, which is actually, in my opinion, it's bringing oftentimes the community together even closer. And we just have to be very conscious of that. And I think it's just, of course it's challenging, right? Because when you're really putting all your effort into something, you're spending 12 hours every day, several years, and some guy is just oh, whatever, never gonna work, some bullshit. It's getting to the point where it's a little bit hard to take it serious in the end. So I wouldn't say that I've given up in terms of convincing people. I just feel they're exactly as you said. Keep building, keep shipping.
Slow
and,
roll.
And things are going to happen. It takes time. It's not some magical, pill that you can just swallow, and then suddenly we're a couple of years into the future. This is some really serious tech that it's being built on.
Yeah.
The way I see it is that if we do things right, this is the foundation of the new internet, right? Which is a more free and open internet in the future, where people actually own their digital identity, they own their assets.
Yep.
To me, it's very, we can't get dissuaded, and we can't give up when there are loud voices who are coming in. So to the gamers, sure, there's some guys who are going to be trying to cherry pick this conversation, no doubt. But yeah, to the gamers who are out there, I'm kind of looking at it and that just can never work. What's actually happening in traditional gaming is that the value that they are giving to these game developers, they're having some fun, they're getting some value back, yes, but there could be so much more that could be shared, which I just think is a very natural next step for this entire industry.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel that's kind of the message that I at least have.
And by the way, it's hard to argue against players, in my mind, hard to argue against players getting their fair share. To me, that seems like an obviously improved model where the community benefits from the value they've created. So I've always been a little bit baffled by how some people don't really seem to grasp that. But I think you're spot on. We really call it Web3 because we view it as the third generation of the internet that combines the best of the Web 1 open source ethos, this enthusiasm for open protocols and open standards, and really more community-oriented approach to building software, and the best of Web 2, meaning smoother user interfaces, more focus on kind of consumers, not just developers. And so, we think that this is an incredibly important shift, and that's why we at Andreessen are spending so much of our time and kind of focus on the category.
Yeah.
I'm spending all of mine.
Nice segue.
I don't do anything else.
Nice segue into the next question I had here, which is more related to the A16z thesis, right? And for those of you guys who don't know this, they have a giga fund, right? They're still deploying funds into the space. But yeah, so how do you view, there are, and one thing I remember distinctly when we were discussing partners for our Series B round, I remember it's oh, well, there are many tourists in the space. And that was one of the reasons why we actually wanted to work with you guys, because we feel there are definitely many theorists who come in and they're oh, there is a lot of money here, we need to deploy, we need to figure it out. But generally speaking, those people who are there in the cycles, that's where a lot of the value is being created. And that also goes for everyone who's still here today and who's watching from home. It's like, really, you guys are here in the bear, and that's where the value is created. So how are you guys seeing like the investment from an investment perspective, deploying capital right now? Because you're still deploying, right? It never stops.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, our investment thesis is completely unchanged by the market. Again, I've been in the space for 9 years at this point, so I'm very at home in a bear. But I think, what we've seen is that the companies and teams that end up doing the best over a long amount of time are the ones who stay super focused and continue to build throughout the market. Obviously, it's like easy to get distracted and whatever, depending on the market conditions. But if you're able to just say, this is where we're going and that's the direction we're going to follow and we're going to keep building throughout, that's what works. And we've seen that time and time again. So from our perspective, I think in some ways it's a little bit nice because obviously, you don't want financial mishap for anyone, but from a technology building perspective, these are the times when a lot of real work gets done.
Yeah, I can only imagine how, pitches and decks have changed just looking back, 8 months, a year, even from where we are today. Of course, we look at many different game studios as well. I can only imagine, like, from your side, right? Do you feel like there's a kind of a flight to quality, in a sense? Like, there's better entrepreneurs, or, like, are people getting scared? Like, more of those who are coming in to build?
Well, I would say, a lot of teams raised capital last year, and they were smart to do so because the market conditions were favorable. And so I think a lot of teams are still kind of, they haven't had to come back to market yet because it's been, relatively short period since the market started trending downwards. But in general, we see great entrepreneurs across cycles. And actually looking back, again, to kind of our earlier funds, many of our best investments were made during bear markets. Yeah. Certainly not all of them. I think you can start a company at any point and end up successful. But it can be a great time to get started.
Yeah, I mean, from a Sky Mavis perspective, obviously we have Ronan. We're looking for, various teams. I think if you were, putting yourself in entrepreneurs' shoes, why do you think they would be working with us in the first place? Like, is there any?
Well, I think, again, you guys have brought together an incredible community and started to launch some really powerful infrastructure. I think, the best way to think about it in my mind is I remember the chart of Axie usage and then the chart after you launched Ronan, and just seeing that dramatic uptick to me really shows that you made something that players were super excited to use. Obviously, it dramatically brought down costs and speed. But now you've made that platform available to others to build as well. And so I think, games that start building in your ecosystem will see a lot of benefits to having a number of other games and an existing player base that they can all kind of share. So to me, that's, one really big part of the value.
Yeah, and the way I see Ronan, right, is, right now it's permission. We are basically curating various tools that we see that other game developers will need, right? So in the future, I just want a very simple interface. Okay, I'm a game developer. I'm coming into Ronan. I'm coming into the Mavis Hub. Oh, I want to have a marketplace. Okay, you flip that switch. Okay, I want to have NFT lending. All right, fine. That's we're bringing that in. All right, I want to deploy XYZ asset as ERC20s. All right, fine. Here's a liquidity pool. Basically, everything that you want to do should be super simple, right? That's the future that we're heading into.
Yeah.
But the coolest thing, of course, is that it's being powered by something super, super serious on the back end, which is, of course, a blockchain. But normal people, they don't really care about a blockchain. They don't even understand what a blockchain is, what an NFT is. So it's from an educational perspective, we have a lot of work to do. But I mean, that's why, still quite early. So
yeah.
A lot of work to do, but it's the improvements here are so drastic, so fast. So yeah, I can't help but feel super bullish. And as I said, this is the best time for builders to be in the space. So yeah, congratulations to everyone who's still here, I guess. All right, we're running out of time in a couple of seconds. Do you have any final last words here, or?
No, I'm just super excited to see this community in person for the first time. It's really amazing what you guys have built. So big props to you.
All right. Thank you for coming, and thanks for everyone for being here. All right.